So if you saw my last video, it was all about how to find great real estate deals, and in this market, focusing on how to build your wholesale list. But dealing with wholesalers comes with its own inherent problems, and you want to make sure you cover your butt so you don't get taken advantage of. I will make you this promise. If you give me a thumbs up down below, and by the end of the video, if you haven't learned at least one thing from this video, then go ahead and take that thumbs up away and put a thumbs down instead, and I'll gladly take it. But I guarantee you're going to learn something in this video. And if you're annoyed by people asking for likes, go ahead and put in the comments down below that you don't like it. If you've ever gotten a wholesale deal, you've probably seen what's called a ARVE number attached to that wholesale deal. And what that stands for is after repaired value. And what the wholesaler is trying to do is he's trying to show you what the property might be worth if you fixed up the property, or you did some repairs, or made some kind of changes to the property to increase the value. So they want to show you what it is now, what you can buy it for, and then what you could turn it into. Now there's a little bit of conflict of interest here because it's in their best interest to not highlight those things that are bad and highlight the potentials. So just be careful when you're looking at the comparable properties that they send that make up this after repaired value, because a lot of times they're not comparable at all. Who is it that determines this ARV? And the answer is, the wholesaler comes up with this number based on what he thinks. But in the end, who's really going to come up with this number is the appraiser that's going to appraise the property when you either sell the property or you go to refinance it. So you don't want to kid yourself. You want to go in with your eyes wide open knowing that your ARV, which my contention is that should be an ARVE, it should be an after repaired value estimate. You shouldn't present it as fact. It's just an estimate on what potentially it could be. And in the appraisal world, we've been doing this for decades, and it's known as a hypothetical condition. And what that means is we're evaluating the property as if something in the future are to happen. If we're like when we're appraising a new construction property and it's not built yet, we're going to appraise it per plans and specs, per the plans and specifications that are provided to us. So we're assuming that we're assuming that the house has been built to those specs, and that's how we're going to appraise it. And in the investor world, that's called an ARV. There's another thing called an extraordinary assumption, and that's when I'm looking at a property and I see this from a wholesaler and I say, okay, I can see the pictures, I can see the rooms. I'm going to assume that there's no layout issues. I'm going to assume that the roof is good because judging by the photos, it looks good. Or I'm going to make these assumptions, and I'm going to base my value based on those assumptions. Now, hopefully I have some kind of inspection period where I can go and verify those assumptions. And if any of those assumptions turn out to be wrong, that will affect the outcome of my appraisal, and I may want to rework the numbers. Okay, now a lot of times with off-market deals, you see this in multifamily quite a bit, and a lot with wholesaling properties, even if it's single family or not. Wholesalers and sellers unfortunately lie, or they're just incompetent. Sometimes they're on, but a lot of times you'll see that they're either incompetent or they're lying. For example, let's say we got an off-market deal. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. It's 1,200 square feet, and he's got 3 comps listed down here, and they both sold for $150,000, and he's selling this property for $100,000. Sounds like we got a $50,000 spread there, and it doesn't need any repairs, so we can buy this property at $100 and resell it at $150. Sounds easy, right? But then you start looking further into those comps that were provided that made up that after repaired value, and you find out that your subject property has no garage, and all of these comps have 2-car garages, and a couple of them have pools, and the third one that didn't have a pool had a nice huge yard. And so really that's a disingenuous portrayal of what the value would be. And yes, you might be able to add on a garage and add a pool, but the expense to do that is way far over and above what you could make on this property. That's why I say sometimes I feel like a lot of wholesalers can be misleading or just flat out dishonest. And I have a lot of good wholesalers that don't do this, but I see it time and time again on probably the majority of wholesalers that I come across. They just over-accentuate what the possibilities are, and they're looking for a bigger fool. It's the bigger fool theory, and it's not new. But the theory goes like this. I'm going to buy this property. I think it's a good deal, and if I can't work it out, I'm sure there's a bigger fool out there that'll buy it for me. And listen, I want to hear your comments. I want to hear if you've ever been burned by a wholesaler or a seller, who has the biggest story? Who's been burned the worst from a wholesaler just by sellers lying or being incompetent? So you just want to be careful when you're reviewing comparable properties that the wholesalers give you that accompany these off-market deals. As a new investor, people just look at square footage and the bedroom count, and they think that's all that makes up a value. And if you've seen my appraisal playlist, I'll put a link down below. Went through a bunch of different ways that you can look at a property to find out if the value's there or not. And a couple of those things that you can get burned are, here's my list. Pools versus non-pools, that can make a huge difference. So lot sizes, you're going to want to make sure the lot sizes on those comparables are similar. You want to make sure the age is similar. A lot of times these wholesalers will use pending sales, and we all know that a pending sale could eventually sell for way less than what it's pending for, and ultimately it may not appraise, and so it may fall through. It's just not a good benchmark for a value. Anything external to the property, like backing up against railroad tracks or against commercial building or anything like that, you want to make sure all your comps are the same. Garage count can be a big one that's often overlooked. And probably the biggest one that we've seen that we've been burned multiple times on is square footage. The wholesaler or the seller will purport the property to be 1,500 square feet. And we're like, oh, well, this is great. We review all the comps. Everything looks good. It even says on the tax records that it's 1,500 square feet. Come to find out after we buy the property that it's only 1,200 square feet. For whatever reason, the wrong map got applied to the assessor's record and nobody questioned it. And so now we're stuck with a 1,200 square foot property that we thought was 1,500. And that can really make a big difference on the value. So you're just going to want to verify your square footage, and there's several ways that you can do that. One is from the county assessor. Oftentimes they have maps online that you can look at. At least they'll have the square footage listed in almost every county that I've ever been in and looked in. The other thing you can do is you can get on the satellite, and there's a lot of measuring tools that you can use, and you can measure a perimeter of a house, make sure to deduct for eaves, and you can get a general idea of what the house is worth. And it doesn't need to be exact. You're just trying to verify that the square footage that they're purporting is, in fact, close enough to the square footage that you're looking for. So in the end, you just want to make sure that the comps that they're presenting are actual comparables to the property. Now, when I say comparables, when they are and aren't comparable, anything's comparable to anything. You can have an orange and you can compare it to an RV. That doesn't mean that they're the same. It's a comparison, but they're just not, they're so far different that it's not even worth talking about. And that's a lot of times what happens with these wholesale comps. So a lot of times we buy properties sight unseen, and so we have to be really good at looking at the photos and trusting our wholesalers or our field people to look at properties and make sure they are what they're being presented as. A couple of ways that we've been burned in the past is low ceilings, and this sometimes is apparent from the photos. You'll see a low ceiling where you've got a door at 7 feet and the ceiling is just a couple inches right above that. You'll know that's a big red flag for us, because it's going to be really expensive to raise up that ceiling. Water and mold issues are other things that could be potentially huge. Functional obsolescence, meaning if there's a funky layout, say you have to walk through a bathroom to get to a bedroom and that's the only way in or out, that can be a big red flag that can be very costly to fix and maybe unfixable. So you just want to know that going in. So hopefully you like this video. Hopefully you learned at least one thing that you can do to help you protect yourself and make sure you don't get taken advantage of by unscrupulous sellers. In the end, there's no real way to protect yourself against every possible thing that could go wrong. But as long as you buy properties right with a good enough margin, and that margin will hopefully help you overcome any kind of misrepresentation or repairs that need to be made that weren't disclosed. You're just trying to mitigate your risk by eliminating as many possible knowns as you can. And I'm out here getting some fresh air in the wonderful Arizona sun. It's actually a little bit breezy right now. It's very nice. I mean, this is Arizona for you. Orange trees along the trail, orchards everywhere, grapefruit trees, nice sunny weather. Unfortunately, we're full though, so we can't take any new residents. You just have to wait for somebody to move out before you can move in. So if you're interested in moving here, shoot me a jingle. I'll put you on the waiting list. And as soon as the house opens up, we'll give you a holler. And we'll see you on the next video. Somebody's harvesting their oranges. They're harvesting their grapefruits. I found myself this nice shady tree to get out of the sun. Orange trees,